We are live.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maggie Ullman. I'm the chair of our city's Environment and Safety Committee, and welcome. Welcome. This is our May 23rd, 2003 remote meeting. All of our council committee members and staff are participating virtually, and to help the audience follow along, I'll state each section of our agenda aloud as we move through it. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link. It's on the front page of our website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option to call in, like I mentioned. To call in and comment live, use the number 855-925-2801 with meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted. You'll hear the live meeting. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'm going to do a roll call. And as I say your name, go ahead and come off mute and say hello if you can, please. So starting out, we have Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
We also have our Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
We also have our Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody.
Good morning, everybody.
Ben. We have our Deputy City Attorney, John Maddox.
Good morning.
Hey, John. Our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herring.
Good morning.
We have our Deputy Police Chief, Jim Baumstark.
Good morning.
And our Fire Chief, Scott Burnett.
Good morning.
Scott, this will be our last committee meeting with you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Look at that smile. Well, we miss you already and glad you're here while you are. We also have our Sanitation Division Manager, Jess Foster.
Good morning.
Hey, Jess. And then our Downtown Planning Manager, Dana Frankel, is also with us.
Morning.
Hey. Oh, and also our Deputy Chief, I see Patrick Crudup, you're here too. I must have missed you on my list.
Good morning.
Welcome. And if I missed anyone else, sorry, but I'm sure we have a good crew today, pretty powerful and timely and important topics. So I'm really excited for us to jump in. We'll shift over into our agenda, and we kick off these calls at this time with a starting round of public comment. Katie, do we have anyone in the queue to start our public comment on today's committee meeting?
One moment.
Thanks.
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2 is approval of the April 25th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Sandra. Second.
Great, I'll do roll call. Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
And myself, aye. They are approved. Next, we move on to an update on single-use plastic reduction with our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herring, and then Jess Foster from our Sanitation Division.
Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Bridget Herring, and I have the privilege to serve as the Sustainability Director here at the city, and wanted to provide you an update on our plastic reduction project, particularly in regards to the public input survey that we had launched, as well as analysis that our Sanitation Division has conducted on these products. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of the key takeaways I would like to leave you with today is that there is a high level of interest, particularly from our residents, around this topic, but we still have some missing voices, both in our impacted communities of residents as well as from our businesses. And this business participation was too low for us to really draw any conclusions about the level of support for the policy and also the level of support that might be required from some of our smaller, more impacted businesses should this policy go into effect. Some of the key data demonstrates that our current sanitation services are inadequate to capture and manage the single-use plastic waste, particularly looking at single-use plastic bags and expanded polystyrene disposable takeout containers, more commonly referred to as styrofoam. And that expansion or changes to our sanitation services are not financially or operationally feasible. And that the infrastructure that we have available to us is particularly limited in disposing of these products or recycling them in some way. And Jess Foster is really going to talk to you about those three data points that surround our sanitation services. So when we go to the next slide, this is a review of the timeline. So this is not a new slide, but like to keep a reminder of where we started with council directing staff to look into this last October. And now we are in the part where we're going to review and refine our engagement and do some additional research before making a recommendation ultimately to City Council in October. So moving on. The survey was open from March 20th to April 30th. And as I said, there was a high level of interest. We received a little shy of 7,000 responses, and a little over 6,000 of those were our resident community. So a lot of interest there. We designed the survey for both residents and businesses. So you could take the survey as either a resident or a business or both. So giving people those options. And we designed the survey questions. We started with the survey that Plastic Free WNC had issued to the business community and polled some residents on in a previous engagement effort, as well as looking at the questions and responses that we got from internal engagement with staff, and then reviewed these with the Sustainability Advisory, members of the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So I want to give them a lot of thanks for coming together to work on something, as well as from our business community. Big shout out to Go Local and Asheville Independent Restaurants, and then also Plastic Free WNC to help us make sure we were asking good questions, trying to remove the biases that we had and get the information we wanted. These surveys were available in 3 different languages, and we did have paper surveys among requests. We also had members of the Buncombe County Communications and Engagement team take paper surveys to the community market. So really appreciate that partnership. And Plastic Free WNC did take some paper surveys and work some of the transit stops and station as well. So if we move on to the next slide, this is just a snapshot of some of the demographic information. I provided a presentation to the Sustainability Advisory Committee that has a little bit more information about some of these results. So if folks are interested to learn more, that presentation and the recording from that meeting are available on the Sustainability Advisory Committee website. But this just gives you a snapshot of who responded. And looking at the percentages of the responses with the percentages of folks that are reported here from our census data, we're reporting underrepresentation from people of color, from renters, and from our low and moderate income folks in particular. And so using that data can really help us focus on the missing voices from the conversation that we need to continue to try and engage with. So if we go to the next slide, this is a summary of the input that we received through that survey. So there's, as I said, there's a high level of support from residents in particular about supporting a ban for plastic bags and expanded polystyrene disposable takeout containers. However, most of the people who responded are already doing this. So they already reported saying they often or always bring their own bags to the store, and reported that this would have a low to medium impact on their lives. So I think the important thing about that is that there's a lot of folks that have already made this shift in our community that are actively engaged on this topic. But we didn't hear a lot from the folks that this might be a bit more of a difficult transition should this policy go into effect. The list of sources for plastic bags and for these takeout containers was majority reported from grocery stores. The second highest on the list was restaurants, which came in at 22%. And so again, I included this data point because it really helps us focus on the businesses that we think would be most impacted to really figure out how to engage with those folks in that community. And then also thought it was interesting that 39% reported recycling their plastic bags. So most people said they used their bags for something else. So it wasn't like everybody else said they threw them away. But this is the percentage of people that are taking those to the retailers that have bins out in front of them that say recycle, take your bags here and put them back in. So I thought that was an interesting data point to include. So if we move on to the next slide to talk about some of the business responses, I included in here the number of businesses. And unfortunately, as you can see on the pie chart, most of the businesses that participated don't say that they use these products. So they're not necessarily impacted should a policy like this go into effect. So I think we still have a lot of work to do in terms of talking to folks. We did get some really good information about where people who do use these products purchase them, and that can inform some of our next steps and some of our next research. So as I mentioned, there was a more in-depth presentation on the survey results to the Sustainability Advisory Committee, but just wanted to give you a little snapshot before I pass it over to Jess Foster to talk about the sanitation analysis, which is on the next slide.
Thanks, Bridget. So our role in this was to look at the capacity of our sanitation division and our municipal services to capture and properly manage some of these single-use plastic wastes. So we compiled and looked at information from a number of different resources. We looked at recycling contamination at our material recovery facility, curbside management. We got roadside, river, and waterway litter data from our community partners who are out there collecting litter every week. We looked at our disposal facility data, so from Buncombe County Transfer Station and landfill about blown litter issues that they have. Buncombe County also recently did a waste characterization of material being landfilled, and so we were able to pull some data from that. We looked at options for EPS recycling or styrofoam recycling, and also looked at compost facility contamination information. And so what we found is that some of the strongest data that we have was around these three items here at the bottom of the slide. And these data points really point to our inability or our inadequacy in our operations to properly capture and manage single-use plastic bags and food takeout styrofoam. So the volume and types of litter found in rivers and on roadways is pretty significant. Just since July, Asheville Greenworks reports collecting over 8 tons of litter from these areas. And they would say that the majority of that litter is single-use plastics. There's also significant cost for staff in contracts and in volunteer time to just manage that plastic waste that has escaped the management system, right? So I mentioned like blown litter at Buncombe County's facilities. Like, for example, they pay over $20,000 a year and spend over 1,200 hours just collecting bags that have blown away from their facilities. So that's a significant investment. And then our recycling stream contamination from these materials is also pretty significant. Curbside management, where our recycling goes, they spend 500, let's say, or average around 600 hours per week picking plastic bags out of the sorting line. So they have to pay people to do that work. So those are some significant impacts that we see that show that these materials aren't getting to where they're really supposed to be. Okay, next slide. So some of the factors that we wondered why that's happening, and it really has to do with the wide distribution and lightweight nature of both of these items. Single-use plastic bags are everywhere, and they're very lightweight, and so it's easy for them to blow. So even if somebody put it into a trash can, for example, it's very easy for it to blow out and then become litter. Same with styrofoam containers, like they're just sitting there and they tend to blow away. They crumble into little pieces, and that becomes really difficult to capture. Also, this type of the food takeout EPS, it has had food in it, and so it's contaminated with food, and so that makes it not a preferred item for recycling. Okay, next slide. So we did look at what are things that we could do to change our municipal operations to better manage or properly manage these materials. So we said, what if we had dedicated curbside recycling for these materials? And we looked at the cost and the operational requirements for that. And it's, you know, in the millions of dollars just to start up service for that type of thing. And we don't have the processing facilities to manage those materials. We looked at a municipal drop-off program for those materials. Again, you've got very expensive one-time startup costs, difficulty transferring the material to where it needs to go without it becoming litter. And we do already, as Bridget said, we already have some retail drop-off programs for plastic bags. So we would just be duplicating efforts that already exist. A lot of people wonder why could we just put them in with our regular recycling and then the material recovery facility pull them out and send them to be recycled. And the problem there is that those materials have to be very clean and dry to be recycled. And so once they go into the recycling truck, they're just too contaminated to be marketed. Next slide. We did look at the management solutions that are out there outside of municipal city services. There are some recycling options for both plastic bags and styrofoam. But like I said, both of those items have to be very clean and dry, and the styrofoam has to be white in order to be recycled. So there are very strict requirements, and the infrastructure that is out there right now doesn't seem like it's able to capture the scale of material that is being produced that we see in our community. So for example, there are maybe 36 retailers within 30 miles of this zip code that are accepting plastic bags. And one problem that we see, like we're seeing it in the landfill or we're seeing it as litter. And that to me indicates that those systems aren't really capable of capturing what is out there. Next slide. Okay. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jess.
Yep.
I really appreciate that. So where do we go from here? Right now, we're looking at developing strategies to get increased engagement from some of those missing voices. So looking to engage some local residents that have some connections and lived experience in the communities that are missing from our current public input effort. And looking at how we get in front of businesses as well. So trying to identify what those strategies are and looking to deploy those in the next month or two. And then also doing additional research on what the product availability is from some of the vendors that some of the businesses have supplied us. Looking at the life cycle costs of different bag options in terms of if we did make a recommendation, what kind of bags would be appropriate to be used. And then also the impact of the policy, both on our waste reduction goal and on core service delivery in terms of what would it take to carry this out should a policy go into place. So that's what's on the horizon. And I believe that's my last slide. So if anybody has any questions, I'm sure Jess and I are happy to answer those.
Thanks to you both. I appreciate it. I have the fortune of sitting on SACE, so I was able to kind of look at some of the deeper dive on this as well. So it's nice to get a second look at all of this. I guess I had maybe just a question of like, am I synthesizing what I'm hearing, particularly just from the analysis that you've done? I think what I was hearing in your work was, hey, say we don't prohibit bags, but we recognize this is a problem. How could we as a municipality address this? What methods, what systems could be put into place? And your analysis sounds to me like it would be pretty extensive and expensive taxpayer programming to ramp up collecting these in a different way versus the alternative, which is, what is being researched is prohibiting these bags. Am I distilling accurately?
Yes.
Okay. I love that y'all did that thorough work. I think it's really important to look at kind of alternatives, especially when a ban is at the table. That's a style of government intervention. If we can do this where folks are all willingly moving in a direction, that's one thing. And I think banning can have a tone to it. So I appreciate doing those alternatives. But then also when I reflect on, Bridget, the information that you shared, when I look at the number of responses, that's the second highest number of responses we've ever had to a municipal survey. Like 7.5% of our city responded largely in favor. And although those folks are the ones that might be kind of the choir that's singing this song already, it also shows us that the folks who are already really willing and motivated are exhibiting this behavior, enthusiastic about this behavior, and that it might be the appropriate next step to have the government intervene and say, look, we're going to prohibit this at point of sale because there's such a willingness and interest in this from the community. So I'm excited to learn from the additional outreach. I definitely want to make sure that the input we get is representative of our different culture and races. So I think that's really necessary. So I'm excited to learn from that. But I find all of this presentation being really continuing to point in the direction that I think we're on the right path to look at prohibiting this at point of sale. And then I did have one question. So I hear a lot of concern, both in the CC meeting today, about the number of businesses that responded. And so what is kind of the total number of businesses that this would impact, or like what percentage threshold would we be satisfied with their input? Because it's still like, if we had, nearly 800 businesses respond, and about 400 of them it does impact. 400 businesses. I don't know how many businesses there are that it's relevant that they have plastic bags or this, polystyrene stuff. And so I'm curious, like, what is that total number to which we're looking for better input?
That's a great question. And the challenge of that is that we are not allowed to have a business scene licensure program anymore. So we had one, it was, I believe, repealed at the state level. And so we don't actually have like a list. And so that is the challenging part about it, is that we don't have a total number. We have reached out to some private publishing, printing services that have mailing lists, and we're looking at trying to figure out how do we gather some more data on who those folks are. But unfortunately, we don't have a directory that we can kind of pull and say, this is how many registered restaurants we have, and then kind of go through that list.
Yeah.
And also, it's the whole city. So we're looking at our entire geographic region. So that does, we've been putting a lot of thought into how we have a team that's relatively pretty small with people capacity, trying to reach out to folks in a way that's representative of our business community that exists all over the city. So that is a challenge, and that's something we're trying to work through right now.
An idea might also be to reach out to our industry partners. I mean, the EDC does very powerful research and analytics. So they might be folks that have this, because my first sense is that 400 businesses, that seems like actually a lot to participate in a survey. So I'd be curious to understand what the input of those businesses that did respond was, because I didn't necessarily see kind of the sentiment from them as much. But Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Yes, okay. First, if we could go back to that slide where she was showing the business breakdown. And I noticed that I think the restaurant industry had very low percentage of people that responded, if I remember correctly. Okay, yes, okay, very low percentage. And the one thing I was concerned about was I did have the opportunity to meet with the Southside Advisory Board, and it was some of the residents that were there, because what has happened is a lot of the, especially Black or people of color, basically have businesses that are small business, and they serve food. And they were really concerned about the cost of using alternative material to the, the plastic and styrofoam. And they were saying it increased their costs significantly. where they actually could not even, make a profit. And that's how bad it was. And if you know, like I said, Hispanics, Blacks, or whatever are really a lot of the ones that actually utilize the food trucks and things and delivery services for foods. So they would be tremendously impacted by that. And then one other thing I was thinking of, I know that we did have a pretty robust number of people that actually participated in the survey. But I think if you look at the actual breakdown, most of those residents were from the West Asheville area, where it basically, we in West Asheville sort of, promote, the green agenda, more or less. So maybe what we really need to do is make sure that we spread out the awareness of these, of what is really going on, and we have more participants from other areas. So that's the only thing I see right now that we actually could maybe, because like I said, in West Asheville, it's an increased large awareness of going green. But in other sections of the city, you see it's not as prevalent. So maybe that would be something we could look at, of how do we grow more interest where it's participatory as opposed to, a band. Thanks.
Manager Campbell.
Yes, you all may recall the kind of the origin of why city staff undertook this initiative is the exact reason that you just talked about, Sandra. We did not feel that there was enough outreach to BIPOC communities, BIPOC businesses, and so we are making this extra effort. And yes, Chairman Ullman, we applaud the number of people who have already participated, but we know we've got to sharpen our pencils and put our boots on the ground to see if there are other ways that we can outreach to these communities, because we are not, and Bridget has expressed this, we're not satisfied with the response to date, particularly from the business community, and just the overall population representation that have responded. Also, I want to commend both of them, both Bridget and Jess, because the approach that we have taken is, if not a policy or an ordinance that bans this, then what? And so I think Jess is picking up on that side of, okay, if we don't have a ban, then what are the other options? And I think it goes back again to Ms. Ullman, what you said in terms of looking at this holistically, that we're not just looking at advocacy for the policy, we are looking at, and what are all the alternatives that we may have to address this pretty significant environmental issue.
Thanks, everybody. All right. If there's no other comments, thank you so much for joining us and the continued work. I know that y'all set out kind of an arc of a year to work through a lot of this, and this update seems really timely, understanding the first sieve of information and then the targeted next steps so that we have representation and representative input. Sounds perfect. So looking forward to hearing the next update. All right, so our next item on the agenda is item number 4, Downtown Safety Initiative update. And our Downtown Planning Manager, Dana Frankel, and Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody, are gonna share about how we've been doing in the last, 23 days since this kicked off. Thanks so much for bringing it to us so we can hear in real time how it's going.
Thank you, Chair Ullman, members of the committee, Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to take a few moments to get us started before I turn it over to our speakers. We've actually got several key staff today that are going to provide updates on the city's 60-day downtown safety initiative. And just for a little bit of context before we get started, the effort was undertaken due to a number of incidents impacting public safety in the downtown area. We're specifically taking targeted steps to address the rise in crime in the downtown area and to implement and operationalize reimagining public safety, which is one of the council's strategic priorities. The effort itself, and Dana's going to talk a lot about this today, it's really, truly an interdepartmental approach that includes a coordinated response from multiple city departments. So not only our public safety departments, but many other operational departments as well. Additionally, we have participation from community leaders, from partners, making this truly a community-based and action-oriented 60-day initiative. Throughout the 60-day period, staff is tracking data, we're testing actions, and we want to make sure and we hope that those actions will result in a safer downtown for everyone. So today we have our first update to the Environment and Safety Committee on this 60-day initiative. We are 3 weeks into it. And what you're going to hear from today is first we'll have Dana Frankel, who's going to start the presentation and end it. And Dana is our project manager for the 60-day initiative. We have Deputy Chief Baumstark and Captain Stepp, who are going to share an overview of APD's efforts as part of this initiative. And finally, we have Assistant Chief Crudup, who is here to review the launch of our Community Responder Pilot Program. So with all those introductions and background, I'm going to turn it over to Dana Frankel to jump into our presentation today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ben, and good morning, council members. And for another introduction, my name is Dana Frankel. I serve as Downtown Planning Manager in the Planning and Urban Design Department, and I'm acting as project manager for this 60-day Downtown Safety Initiative. And I'm happy to be here today to provide some updates with you all on the initiative. And again, you'll hear from some other folks on their perspectives and their specific efforts as part of this citywide program. So next slide, please. So we'll start with our key takeaways, and you've been kind of hearing this thread going into the launch of this program, but downtown public safety is a complex issue and requires a community response. This initiative very much takes an interdisciplinary and interdepartmental approach across the organization and community. And the focus of the initiative is on conditions related to public safety, cleanliness, as well as helping those in need. Targeted efforts may shift during this period in order to be responsive to the needs. Services and efforts are being tracked, and they will inform, along with other ways of measuring impacts, next steps. And the public is encouraged to get involved and stay informed. Next slide, please. So just as a general overview, this initiative launched on May 1st. Again, it's a 60-day multi-department effort that provides a focus on safety, cleanliness, and assisting individuals in need in the Central Business District. Focused efforts of the initiative include increased law enforcement presence by APD, presence and proactive assistance of firefighter staff as part of the Community Responder Pilot Program, which you all have heard about at your previous meetings, enhanced security in parks with a focus in Pritchard Park, increased cleanliness activities across the organization, lighting review and improvements, as well as code compliance and enforcement. There's also a focus on strengthening relationships with local private sector partners and nonprofit organizations. And staff is supporting that in a few different ways. We're facilitating safety assessment walks with business and community representatives to review conditions and identify and work towards solutions. We're also supporting community cleanups in the downtown area, and that's with some help from Asheville Greenworks. And we're asking community members to report issues of concern. We're providing guidance on the best ways to do that, as well as steps businesses and residents can take directly to improve conditions related to safety. And an important aspect of the initiative, which we're going to talk more about today, is our tracking of our activities during this time. We're working with the city's Office of Data and Performance And all of this work that we're tracking is going to better inform our areas of focus, both during the initiative as well as our strategies for moving forward. And we'll talk more about how to view and receive those updates, but just know that we are updating the website regularly with that information and sending updates by email. And so at the end of the 60-day period, staff will assess whether or not our actions are having an impact on downtown safety and determine next steps, both to support a safer downtown and city as a whole. Next slide, please. And so before we get into some of the details of our activities thus far, I just want to call out a few highlights. And just keep in mind, and I'll probably say this again when we dig into the numbers, but this is for a period between May 1st and May 14th. So this is the first 2 weeks of the initiative. Staff has conducted multiple corridor lighting assessments, and we will continue to do that weekly. One community cleanup took place the first week in May, and we have 3 additional cleanups scheduled. That first cleanup was actually with city employee volunteers. We're working with Asheville Independent Restaurants, and the Downtown Association to conduct 3 safety assessment walks over the next few weeks in different areas of downtown. And we're using this initiative as an opportunity to test some new cross-departmental coordination strategies in order to improve the way we work together on an ongoing basis. And when we dig into the data, you'll see we are tracking activities in 4 interdisciplinary categories. Those are community support, cleanliness, environment improvement, and compliance. And before we dig into those, we wanted to give an opportunity for the police department and fire department to just share a little bit more about their efforts during this time. And with that, am I handing it off to Deputy Chief Bumstark or Captain Stepp?
Yes, ma'am. You can do
Great.
both. So you get us both. Hey, I want to appreciate the opportunity to give you some updates. I know that our statistics are later on in the presentation, so this is kind of a larger view of what the police department is doing. Something to remember is this is only the first 2 weeks of this 60-day initiative. So obviously the numbers and what we're going to do later in the initiatives are going to change. But for the first 2 weeks, basically the first thing we did was increase presence. I mean, we have foot patrols, bike patrols. I don't know if you've been downtown. It's been a long time since we had officers on bikes riding around downtown. We have a gym car running around. And we have obviously officers and cruisers driving around. We've also community policing focus, big. I don't know if anyone's here has had the opportunity to meet Cora, our new therapy dog, but she's been downtown, a big, huge hit. We have officers talking to businesses, talking to visitors, and talking to community members downtown. And this has all had a very positive things from the community. So next slide, please.
All right, so we've taken this first couple of weeks through this initiative to really focus on education, primarily those that may be affected with some type of enforcement. So we've tried to educate just on what the ordinances and the laws are. Came out with a lot of verbal warnings before we started with the enforcement. We have been enforcing, and that enforcement has been fair but firm. We've conducted a lighting assessment, as Dana said, with a number of city departments, and we continue to report weekly on lights out in other areas that we were not able to get to. The feedback that we've received thus far it's just been nothing but positive. And that's just positive for all departments, not just the police department. But I think the feedback that we're receiving on the street is that they can see a true collaboration amongst city departments. And it's been very positive.
So that is our high level. And like I said, a lot of our statistics are later on in the presentation, so I don't want to take anyone's thunder. Allow them to speak about them. So unless anybody else has any questions, we will pass it on to. Go ahead. You're
Great.
good.
We could pass it on to Assistant Chief Kruda, please.
Good morning, council, city staff, and anyone who's listening in. I'll be glad to give you the 3-week update on the community responder program. Doing some great work out there. The team, they're listening in also. And maybe once, if we still have some time, we can let them give you some conversation about what the work that they're doing. They're doing some outstanding stuff in our community. So the team is proactively engaging the unsheltered population throughout downtown to identify needs and share available resources. They have multiple success stories that they've reported of connecting individuals to shelters and basic needs. Those will be some of the things I will like for them to share with the team here. They've been connecting with businesses to understand their experiences that they've been having in the downtown area, and they've collected that data as well. They're staffed with 2 to 3 people per day, routinely from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. They've made adjustments, sometimes coming in earlier and or staying later to make adjustments as far as what the population is doing in our downtown area. They've logged over 200 interactions at the time of these slides being created, but to date, they have actually 290 interactions, with 260 of those, which is a little bit over 90% being proactive, and over 100 responses to our businesses. They've gathered information during each interaction and identified some resource gaps. Next slide, please. Questions have been developed with the Homeless Strategy Division. We coordinated with them to kind of figure out what we need to be collecting and what questions we need to be asking. Some examples of these questions are immediate needs. Can I help you get anywhere? Connecting to resources. Are you working with someone on housing? A housing history. Where was your last housing? Resource, service history. Can I connect you to Homeward Bound? And as well as our business outreach, what has been your experience in the downtown? We've documented and identified these needs, and if there was a resolution, we provided that. Next slide, please. So here's our dashboard here. As you can see, there are 267 interactions. This is in the first 2 weeks of the program, which you see here. Again, I mentioned to date, currently we have 290 interactions. When we were 2 weeks in, we had 200 proactive and 16 responsive interactions. So those responsive interactions, or when the teams, when they're out and about, if someone identifies someone else in need, they will respond to that individual in need. And they have multiple stories that they can share if you'd like to hear those.
Hi, I'm Captain Sullivan with the Community Responder Program, and I want to talk to you about 3 events that occurred in the past 2 weeks. One in which we met an individual named Charles, who was on the streets. His story was that he was driving to Nashville, and his van broke down in Asheville, and he had been on the streets for 5 days. So I asked him what were his needs. He said he didn't want to stay in Asheville. He just wanted to get back home to Marion, North Carolina. So I got in connection with other community responders that day, actually within minutes, and had him transported to A-Hope. And later that day, they connected him with a bus, and he was back home in Marion, North Carolina after being on the streets of Asheville for 5 days. So that was a great success. Another example of de-escalation of an event, while we were collecting data with the business owners in the downtown business district, we noticed that Ladder 1 had responded to a subject down call in front of the Ben & Jerry's ice cream store, and an EMS supervisor was already on scene. The gentleman was a little upset, and we intervened and were able to release both the ladder company and the EMS supervisor while we spoke to him, de-escalated the event, found out what his needs were, and he simply needed medication from his doctor. So working in conjunction with another organization, we were able to get him transport to his doctor, get his medication, and resolve that situation for that day. Another example that we have and there are many, and this is just three that I'm going to give you today, is across this intervention. Several of our first responders went to the Haywood Congregation Church on Wednesday earlier in the month of May, and they met an individual who was struggling with drugs and alcohol. And at that time, he wasn't very forthcoming in terms of all of his needs. And it turned out that he had been on the streets of Asheville for quite some time, almost a year, from what the individual was saying. And he was currently estranged from his wife and his children. He'd lost his housing last year and turned to drugs and was depressed and living on the streets of Asheville for almost a year. A individual who was close to that homeless person, Jesse, contacted one of our community responders and informed us that Jesse was finally ready to go to detox and take care of his drug abuse issues and his addiction issues. So as soon as we received that phone call, we immediately responded to the individual over AHOPE, to Jesse. We picked him up and took him to ADAC in Black Mountain, and he was able to be admitted, and he's currently still there getting treatment for his addictions. So there's just three examples of what we've been doing.
Thank you, Captain Sullivan. I think that's our next.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sullivan, I didn't raise my hand, but Deputy Carter, could we have the others introduce themselves?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, I'm Lieutenant Fortenberry. I've been here at the fire department for over 23 years now.
I'm Steve Kowalczyk. I'm a senior firefighter. I've been with Asheville for 8 years.
Thank you.
Engineer Adam Hurt. I've been here a little over 19 years.
Well, he was hiding. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate the story. I mean, I love it. It's really powerful to have the data and the story at the same time, because either are incomplete, right? It shows us a picture that's really helpful. And I also just want to express super gratitude because, you know, when you signed up for to be a firefighter 23 years ago, this might not have been that job description, but we've seen your department and folks like y'all really step in and say, yeah, I can figure out a way to help. And you're really being creative and innovative, figuring out how this goes. You're probably figuring out on a daily basis how this is going to work out. And that takes the spirit of can do. And it's obviously working. So just really excited for our community, what this could look like. And an idea means nothing if there aren't people that have the right skills to figure out how to make it work. And I feel like I hear that from this team. So just really glad that you were able to join us and share some of that. Vice Mayor Kilgore. Oh, you're on mute still.
Just want to sort of echo what you're saying. Basically, I am so, I can't tell you, this program, the whole program is so wonderful and it's so needed. And it's almost like that intermediary, you know, that we were missing, that connection. This is a great connection. And it's so powerful. And the thing is, I guess like Maggie, Councilwoman Ugly was saying, I can't imagine what this program is going to look like in the future, because and it's very unfortunate that things have to happen before we put things in place. But I love what the police department is doing. I love what the fire department is doing. It's just making our city just such a positive inspiration, and it's just bringing people together. And I just can't thank you all enough, and very grateful for the work that you're doing. And I realize that it takes a lot, you know, but you're all are. When they talk about boots on the ground, this is boots on the ground. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on into the numbers. So as you can see in the next two slides, and as you can find on the project page, we are tracking activities in a very detailed level during this program. This reporting, again, is just from the first 14 days of the initiative, May 1st through 14th. So we will be updating the numbers every 2 weeks on the website. And just to highlight our cleanliness activities, so you heard from the police department and fire department, but I want to recognize staff from sanitation, public works, parks, parking services, and others for their work during this time, including their efforts around cleanliness. We'd love to have everyone come and speak with you all, but I think we'd be here for too long. So, so I don't think I'll highlight all of these numbers, but just encourage you all to take a look and to, again, let you all know that we will be updating these as we go. So community support. Members of our team are working with community organizations and service providers regularly. We're having regular meetings with those folks. Our park security provides assistance regularly in downtown parks. And you heard a bit about our community responder program, just to call out a couple things here. Over the first 2 weeks, they had 72 wellness checks and 4 first aid wound care needs addressed. So they really are engaging proactively with folks within our downtown. And let's move on to the next slide, please. In terms of compliance, this is a responsibility shared by multiple departments, and we're tracking these interventions, which includes verbal warnings. So we can see on the previous slide, we included interactions that the police department is having with businesses. Here we have 146 verbal warnings carried out by the police department, in addition to citations, in addition to rules compliance by our park staff, in addition to parking enforcement. So environment improvement, another one of our interdisciplinary categories. So this addresses conditions that generally contribute to a safer feeling, well-maintained downtown. This includes potholes, lighting, issues related to noise, as well as amenity repairs and improvements. I think we can, and then I want to point out that all of this information is available on the project page, and we've circled here on the graphic. It's a second tab, so that might not be a tool we've used a whole lot before, but it's under the response by the numbers tab. Councilwoman Kilgore. You're muted.
You're muted.
When you mentioned 146 verbal warnings carried out by Asheville Police, could you give us some examples of those verbal warnings and for what? Sort of.
Sure. I'd love to ask the police department to share more insight on that.
That could be a number of things. For example, trespassing charge where they might be laying underneath a trespass sign in a doorway or something like that. And we just simply ask them to move along and advise them that moving forward, they can't be there. Same thing with low-level offenses where we just try to give verbal warning. It's where we really try to educate to make sure they understand what loitering means, what no trespassing means before we just come in and issue a citation or make an arrest.
Thank you. I have another question. Oh, Manager Campbell. So like I said earlier, hearing the story is really fantastic, and I love seeing the data. Curious if I know that we have a lot of crime tracking data and software and dashboards elsewhere. Is that linked into this so that folks who want to see the whole picture of a lot of these efforts are, here's what we're putting in to the system. And I think kind of the crime data is what the result is. I know that reducing crime takes a lot of various strategies, and it's complex, and it's not as simple as 1, 2 = 3, but just curious if that data will be folded into this also.
I am going to hand it off to Captain Stepp to respond to that probably a little bit more thoroughly, but I'll say that we want to do that analysis at the end of the 60-day initiative, just so we can get the full picture. Captain Stepp, do you want to add anything?
No, I think what you said, we are planning on doing a full analysis at the end, but I think what you will see and what we've already seen is an increase in calls for service because we're encouraging our business owners to call. We're encouraging our responders to report. You also will see an increase in officer-initiated activity because we are proactively out there engaging with the community. And there's also an increase in your lower criminal offenses as we get out with our enforcement effort.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yes, thank you. I think that you have heard consistently a term called proactive. And I know that the community has been concerned about you're not doing enough, you're not doing it fast enough. But what we thought, with the encouragement, quite frankly, of the former chair of the Public Safety Committee, then at the time, that said, staff, I think we can do something particularly related to the community responder program to help support what the county community paramedic program is trying to do. Can you all go and kind of think about how to do this? And so what we've tried to do is not only be proactive, but also to be comprehensive. Because as you said, public safety is all of our responsibility, and organizationally, as part of reimagining public safety, we are taking that seriously. But it has taken us some time, and the chief says this all the time, chief of police. It has taken us time to truly understand what that means in order to operationalize that. And so this is a classic example that gives us a foundation of how we translate all these lessons learned to other parts of our community. This will be how we work. This isn't an experiment. This is truly training for us to be a better organization and for us to deliver services in a more impactful way. And when I said the former chair of the Public Safety Committee, that was actually Shanika Smith, and I want to give her credit and lift her up for challenging us and inspiring us and saying, we got to do something. And the community responder program, as you can see, this whole effort is not about displacing people. It really is about getting out into that space and helping people. And I just can't say enough about the efforts. And we know we've got a lot of work to do. We know this. But sometimes it helps from an employee morale, and I hope from the community's perspective, to celebrate a little bit of a victory, because those three examples that were given by those firefighters, those people's lives have changed, period, nonstop. And due to this effort, we were able to make a difference. So thank you to my staff.
Well said. Well said. I've said this more than once, but I feel like we might look back at 2023 as a real turning point. And I feel that turning. So grateful. Other questions or comments?
We do have just a couple more slides.
Great.
Thank you. Love all the participation. This is great. Next slide, please. So rounding things out here, the public can find information about this initiative on the project page, as well as guidance for reporting concerns and steps to consider taking directly in order to improve safety conditions. If you Google Asheville Downtown Safety Initiative, this page should come up. And we're sending email updates out regularly. The next one will go out later today, and that will include the latest information about the initiative. And folks can sign up to receive those updates on the project page. We also have set up an email. This is available to anyone, particularly if you're interested in organizing a community cleanup or a safety assessment walk. Please contact us there, or we welcome additional ideas at that email or any feedback that you have. Next slide, please. And just to close with our key takeaways, so downtown public safety is a complex issue and it requires a community response. As you've heard throughout from all of us, this initiative takes an interdisciplinary approach across the organization and community. The focus is on many different things, conditions related to public safety, cleanliness, and helping those in need of assistance. Targeted efforts may shift and have shifted in small ways during this period in order to be responsive to the needs. And these services and efforts are being tracked, and that will inform next steps. And we encourage the public to stay informed and to get involved. And we'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have. Next slide is our question slide. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And I can see there's a lot of coordination to do across the departments, and grateful that, Deborah, you've seen and really that vision of this being an all hands on deck across all departments, not just one department, and that we've resourced it that way. I think that's really wise, and really grateful, Dana, that you're leading the team through it. The only thing that comes to mind is, when I think about us as a team, from the community to all the staff who've done a tremendous amount of work to pull this into a comprehensive approach. And now that we're in the 60-day initiative, I think about our role as the policymaker while y'all are doing the hard work on the ground, collecting the data, and we're looking towards that 60-day mark where we kind of step back and kind of go, all right, what's working, what's not? For us, let's fast forward time and say this will be radically successful and we will feel the impacts we want. What type of policy conversations should we all be anticipating through this committee to support continued success? So that's less of a, hey, someone come up with a list, but more of a, while we're doing the hard work and our staff are doing the hard work, it's almost a question for myself and for the rest of us on council of like, okay, well, what should we be anticipating? Should we want to continue? What type of policy support will we need for that? And again, I don't have an answer, but that comes to mind of willing the future we want, where this really turns the dial on impact, and knowing that we set a 60-day mark for a particular specific reason, and that sustaining or growing these efforts, I hope, is something we'll all be wanting. So what's that going to take of us? So I don't know if that brings up thoughts for anybody else, but I just wanted to put that in. Again. Yeah.
I think this is policy. We will be able to collect a lot of data. And so we will have an understanding of, from a regulatory perspective, do we have the right types of ordinances in place that will either prevent, mitigate some of the kinds of issues that we are having downtown, like graffiti ordinance. And I mean, there's a number of things where we may get more information that we think that you all may be able to affect through, taking action. But also, we will have information about what it actually cost us to do this work. And in particular, again, I want to lift up the community responder program. We have opportunities, I think, to encourage other firefighters to get the training and increase, our coverage outside of downtown to other parts of the community. And obviously that's going to take resources. We have ARPA funding right now. We have the opioid settlement right now. So I think that those are things that I hope that you all will consider in terms of, maybe even making mid-year budget adjustments in order for us to truly gear up to not only have this focused on downtown, but also other parts of the community. And I just want our community to understand that we are trying to get to you, and we haven't forgotten about you. We do want to, again, make this much, much easier to expand into other geographies by this particular lesson learning opportunity for us.
That's great. Kind of putting some seeds out there for us as a community and us as policymakers to be reflecting and thinking. Thanks, Deborah. All right. Thank you so much to the whole team of staff who joined us today to give this update. I know that pulling information together takes time and that we're really focused on being out in the community. So I really appreciate for this midway check-in. And I think that'll conclude that item on our agenda. And the fifth and final item for this month is a second public comment round. Katie, is there anyone in the queue that wants to chime in today?
Checking right now. No, we do not.
Great. Well, with that, we are adjourned for the day. Thanks everybody for putting your time in. And for many of us, we'll all see each other later at our council meeting. Take care, everybody.